ancient history is wrong.
What?
And we've got a roadie from Metallica here to explain it to you.
Oh dear.
But now, archaeology is completely different. Archaeology is science. I'm a scientist. I'm a scientist.
Oh dear. He gets deep into this stuff, Joe.
I'm sure he does. His YouTube channel is incredible.
I was messaging you, I think, after we had Ben.
Uncharted X is a great
Yeah.
channel.
And you've been to Giza.
No, I've never been to Giza.
Oh dear.
What money? Somebody's gonna send me money, oh boy!
Wow.
Uncharted
X on YouTube.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
I was messaging you, I think, after we had Ben Van Kirkwick on the pod, and Uncharted X, the guy who was the pyramid.
Yes,
And,
he's great.
He's great, and everybody was like, "Dude, it's so awesome." Shane Gillis's dad showed up to the pod, and I was like, "What?" And I guess they think that he looks like Shane, an older version of Shane.
Oh, I didn't stab the kid. But I tell you what, I wanted to afterwards.
Wow.
That belongs in a museum.
You look like the Indiana Jones girlfriend.
Why can't I be Indiana Jones myself? Why do
You
I have to
can't.
be the girlfriend?
Because I'm Indiana Jones.
Okay, you can be Indiana Jones.
I've done it for 25 years in the field, and believe me, I've done it dry, I've done it wet, and the wet is much better.
I don't waste my time.
unchartedx.com. It's unchartedx.com. Okay.
Oh dear.
Let me ask you something. Look at all these rocks and shit laying out in the backyard.
They're called ruins, huh?
Ruins, huh?
Uncharted X
on YouTube.
Oh dear. What's happening, people? Good to see you all in the chat. Welcome to everybody. Thanks for jumping into another live stream today. What's the music? That is Deos by $50 Dynasty, my good friend Kyle's band. Kyle from the Brothers of the Serpent. That is one of his tracks. Hope you enjoyed it. I love that song. I think it fits with the material really, really well. But yeah, thanks guys for turning up today. It's going to be an interesting little chat today. Many thanks to the mods who are in the chat as well, helping me out a little bit. Yeah, this was fun, and actually I noticed also David Stig Hansen. Thanks so much for the $10 for the super chat, mate. David is the guy who went to the recat structure, went out there and did what needs doing to film that place. It's kind of a rough place to go, but yeah, we're going to get into some interesting topics today. Some of you may have seen the short that I put out recently. If you were part of my YouTube channel members or Patreons or any of the people who support Uncharted X, you would have seen I was posting live videos and updates, did a little live stream talking about it, but recently, I think a week or two ago, was over in Florida doing some interesting work with fragments of ancient Egyptian hardstone vases, in particular putting them under a scanning electron microscope. So I was posting kind of live updates and day-by-day sort of details to patrons and channel members. It's the type of thing I try to do for people that support the channel. But I am also working on like a produced video of the results. I put the short out. I actually thought it would be a good idea to just live stream it and go through some of this raw material. I've kind of arranged a little timeline talking about and talking through a few things. It was kind of an interesting set of circumstances that got me out there in the first place. I had an offer. I was in communication with a guy named Max Zamilov, who's a scientist, and I want to just say a very big thank you to Max for reaching out and letting us use, his equipment. And I'll talk a bit more about Max as we go into this. He's also part of. Let me switch over here to where are we? This one here, so we can see the full screen, and I'm not so big on the screen. He is a scientist, indeed.
I'm a scientist.
Well, he's a scientist.
I'm a scientist.
And of course, these days, as you know, archaeology is different, right?
But now, archaeology is completely different. Archaeology is science.
Science. So, yeah, Max is a scientist, but he had reached out and said, "Hey, listen, he happens to own some scanning electron microscopes, and he's like, it would be really interesting to look at fragments of some of these hardstone vessels or other bits of stone, and in particular look at the tool marks Because even some of the fragments that we have do have actual tool marks on them, tubular drill marks. We'll look at those. We'll talk about them. And even the finished surfaces, right? If anything that's been machined or polished, when you look at it under a powerful microscope, you're going to see tool marks. So even things that appear and feel smooth to the touch and the eye, you're still going to, at the microscopic level, see tool marks and indentations, and indeed we did that. I also happened to combine that with a trip. I went out to see Matt Bell. So I think some of you may know who Matt Bell is. He runs the Limitless podcast. He's been heavily involved in the Vase project. He's the guy who's been buying a lot of these just remarkable vases and other ancient Egyptian artifacts. He's bought several more since I had the chance to see him last. So, and in fact, we recorded my podcast with him on the 1 year anniversary date of the first time I went on his show, and I think I was his first guest. And it was great to see how he's progressed, how he's updated his studio. It's fully professional. And look at some of the new vases and articles, and we'll talk a little bit about that too as we get into it. So I will try and get to questions. I will break for super chats when I can as well. Yes, I think as some of you may have known from the short, we did find some interesting things. I want to kind of provide some context around all of that, around what we found, around everything else to do with it. What my takeaways from this work was. We spent the better part of 3 days essentially with Max and with his electron microscope, looking at various little fragments. We'll take a look at all of those. But just by way of background, I mean, so Max, just so you know, I mean, he is. I mean, these days he's an entrepreneur. He's a scientist. He's working on applied sciences. He has a PhD in physics. He taught at Penn State for I think 8 years. Most of his research does focus on ultrasonics and machining and cavitation. In fact, he has a fusion reactor, and if you sort of search his name, you'll find this type of thing where it says that his research focuses on fusion induced by cavitation, where he injects deuterium gas into a reactor filled with water, causing bubbles to crash and produce neutrons and heat. This process is not specifically cold fusion, but rather an equivalent of sound fusion. And in fact, so this picture here that you're seeing was actually in Max's lab in one of the rooms of his house, and this is a large titanium rod that he has that he's using to induce that sort of cavitation and do ultrasonics, and it's actually quite an interesting. We spent a little bit of time talking about this because it's one of the reasons that he came back and talked about potentially one of the takeaways from this whole experiment was that potentially ultrasonics might have been involved in the actual machining of these vases and these fragments, because one of those key takeaways was that the fragments themselves were just remarkably clean. There was actually very little to see in them. The objective was really to look at tool marks and to look in those stones and try and look for embedded fragments of material, metals in particular, that might be remnants from whatever machining process was used to make them. That might sound like, you wouldn't see any metal in that from machining process, but at a microscopic level, when you're down there looking at microns, that however it was done, if it was machined with metal, there's a good chance that there's still going to be embedded fragments of that metal, little tiny slivers, only a few microns potentially in size, that are embedded in that metal that are only really visible under conditions like a scanning electron microscope. That's how it would work. That's how it would be if these things were actually made with, say, copper tubes and grinding with sand and copper. You would find evidence for that, I think, even to this day. And one of the key takeaways was what they're actually remarkably clean. But what metals we did find were very interesting, and we'll get into that kind of up front too. The other big takeaway that I think is worthy of as much attention as the things that we did find was what we didn't find. And what we didn't find on any of the things we looked at was copper. There was just no copper anywhere in any of these samples, which is interesting because that is the mainstream explanation for how a lot of the parts of the machining was done. In particular, the tubular drill, because that's kind of like the first step of making one of these vessels. You'll often find at the base of them, either the plate or the vessel itself, you'll have that marking from a tubular drill. We know that these sort of tubular drill holes were made with something. And the mainstream explanation for that has always been, well, they used, copper tubes and they ground on them with sand and things like that. And that certainly doesn't seem to be the case from what we found from this. And I like this little shot here just from Max's lab, and we'll get into the actual fragments here in a minute, but it's just an indication of how you can how ultrasonics can work, because this rod that he uses to produce like these ultrasonics, it's not in contact with anything except like the oil that he uses in the reactor, and just that cavitation and that that vibration, it's actually wearing away the edge of that rod. You can see that quite clearly here, how the rod's actually getting worn through this process despite not being in physical contact with anything else. And if I play this, you'll see a little bit more of his lab here. You actually see this little fusion reactor that he has set up for cavitation reaction. That's the rod. This is his reactor. It's filled with oil. I think he was doing experiments to try and see if under different conditions he could alter the rate of I guess radioactive decay of different elements, and he's like putting basically deuterium infused titanium into there as reactive fuel to see this. The whole thing's surrounded by borax, boxes of borax, boron's being a very good radiation shield. He's not trying to shield from the reactor, he's trying to shield the reactor from cosmic rays, so he can get accurate measurements within the reactor, the way that he works. So this is interesting stuff he's doing. It wasn't the focus of it.
Sometimes the glass breaks.
And he said, sometimes the glass actually breaks from this the cavitation that he generates in there. And this is all like really cool stuff. It's a lot of the things that he was doing. But he's very qualified, very smart guy. You can Google him. He's got a bunch of patents. He does a lot of work. He does applied sciences these days. But very kind of Max to reach out to us and ask the question and let us play with his very expensive scanning electron microscopes, which we'll get into. He also happens to have in his garage like an 8-foot-tall Tesla coil, which we didn't get the chance to turn on, but I thought this was also pretty damn impressive, right? How many people have a Tesla coil in their garage like this? Pretty amazing. So this is the setup, and we'll go through kind of how these work. This is actually two scanning electron microscopes, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the right, you might notice a couple of differences here with this cylinder. So the one on the right, we use the one on the left. The one on the right, its detector is actually cooled by liquid nitrogen, and this is the tank for liquid nitrogen. There wasn't any liquid nitrogen in it. The one on the left is cooled by, I think, cooling fans. You'll notice in the footage when we're in the room, it's pretty noisy because you've got fans running that are cooling the detectors and the equipment, and obviously there's computer hardware and all that stuff. And also the chamber itself, which is this drawer that you can see that's pulled out, and this is the drawer and the other one pushed in. This is held under vacuum. So the machine only works when the sample chamber or the area with the piece of stone in it is at a vacuum. So there's a vacuum pump that's always running. So it's fairly noisy, but if you want the standard definition of how an electron microscope works, it's essentially what I've got here, which is a type of electron microscope that produces images of a sample by scanning the surface with a focused beam of electrons. The electrons interact with atoms in the sample, producing various signals that contain information about the surface topography and composition of the sample. That's what we're doing here. So not only do you get this sort of very, powerful microscope to look at the surface, you're also getting returns that tell you the composition of what the surface is made up of. So what are the elements essentially that are in the sample that you're looking at based on the returns of electrons that come off it. The electron beam is scanned in a raster scan pattern. The position of the beam is combined with the intensity of the detected signal to produce an image. And there's a couple different images that you'll see as we go through this. There's two different detectors. You kind of have that primary detector, which is more of a topographical view, but most SEMs also have a secondary detector, which actually works by picking up like essentially secondary electrons that are emitted by atoms that are excited by the electron beam. Essentially what happens is, this beam hits it, and whatever it's hitting shoots off secondary electrons, and it picks those up, and you get, metals, for example, give off a lot of secondary electrons, so they appear brighter on the screen. So you kind of have these two views of like a straight topographical view, and then one that is secondary or a backscatter view that shows you, okay, metals and different elements in the material is going to show up differently based on how many electrons it's emitting. You can also get bright surfaces based on angles. So if you have like a particular angle of stone, think of like a piece of crystal, like quartz or something like that, that's reflecting the electrons. That'll also show up brightly, things like that. So, some SEMs can achieve resolutions of better than 1 nanometer, which is what, a millionth of a meter or something like that. It's incredibly tiny. A micron or a micrometer is a thousandth, I think, of a millimeter. And with these ones, these are fairly old. They're not like modern day, like state of the art electron microscopes, but they're sufficient for the purposes of what we were trying to do. And they do give you like just thousands x kind of magnification down to that micrometer scale, which is really interesting. I am trying to keep up with the chat here as we go. And I'll play this, and we'll get a little bit of an explanation about how this works and the first sample kind of being put in there. And we'll talk about the samples here in a minute after we get done with the electron microscope. So, so here's the machine itself. This is the sample chamber. You can see you've got a little platform in there. So it's actually quite small. This is one of the reasons you can't put like full whole vases in this. You have to sit it up on this platform. You have to get it pretty close to the detectors, which are up at the top underneath, for it to return signals. And to get that elemental composition analysis done. So, pieces are best. And also flatness. You need something that's kind of flat, relatively flat to it in order to actually get a return for that elemental composition. And we found that out as we went to sort of the angled surfaces on the stone. If it was put in at a funny angle, you really weren't getting much in the... You'd get an image, but you wouldn't get kind of that elemental analysis of what the material was made of, which... And again, we'll talk about that a bit more when we get to the actual samples. So this is the detector. So this is where it's picked up. There's an electron beam. I do like this caution. Consult gun servicing precautions before opening gun for service, which seems fairly obvious, but don't monkey with the electron gun, I guess, is the takeaway.
Wow.
All right. Let's see. So I think this is at the back. So just to run down to the machinery, you can see the vacuum pump. I'm pretty sure this is the vacuum pump that was used to pump this thing down to vacuum.
It's actually good. These are wires. Data acquisition devices.
Seems fairly simple.
Yeah, as Russ says, pretty simple.
Yeah, leave it on.
Yeah.
All right, so it's speaking it up.
Excellent.
Okay, so as this thing goes, it pumps the once you put the piece in the container, it'll pump it down. The vacuum pump will go. You'll spin up your basically your electron beam. At this point, I think it was the beam energy was like 20 kilovolts. We did actually test this with copper too. Later, he did have a copper bar, like a copper rod. We stuck that in the microscope afterwards and took a look at it just to make sure, because he also uses copper to calibrate it. You kind of have all of your controls, the vacuum, the strength, the focal beam, the magnification length, all that type of stuff in here. And I kind of ask Max here a little bit about the microscope itself. So it's in there. Your kind of cable management, my kind of cable management too, mate.
Yeah, well, I might...
Yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just whatever you want to do.
Well, there's a whole... I'll have to show you a picture of it if I can dig one up, the one that Matt's got to see.
So Max hasn't stolen these electron microscopes. They're his. Part of his business and what he does is he actually refurbishes and sells scientific equipment. So he's an entrepreneur as well. He does run a business. If you want to buy an electron microscope, I'm pretty sure he has some for sale.
If it's worth...
I think he said like new electron microscopes might be like $250,000, like $250,000. But you can pick up secondhand units like this between, I don't know, 25 to 40,000, depending on condition and what they're doing. Brother, Nick, $2 super chat, man. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
My brother. Yes, Nick is, we've been streaming some Warhammer 40k over on the Twitch channel recently, which has been amazing.
It's worth doing.
And I was here with Russ too. I want to say that as well. Like Russ from the Brothers of the Serpent, Russ Allen, my good friend, was over here with me. And he actually also joined me on Matt Bell's podcast. But between us, we both have a couple of different samples that have been given to us that were useful for looking in here. And I'll show you the samples. We'll get into that in a little bit. First, let's just talk a little bit about how a scanning electron microscope works and what we're doing.
No, he's interested.
Okay, all good. So,
So,
do you mind placing the sample here?
grab it.
There he is.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's like nearly flat.
Yeah, the flatter the better, right?
Yeah.
So a little fragment. See this this is a salt and pepper diorite. Actually, that one actually has. We zoom right into it. What's interesting about this fragment? We'll talk a bit more about this, but it has the markings of basically a tubular drill. So this is the flat sections here, and then the lip sort of arcs up, but it has these markings from what looks like a tubular drill. Let's put that back down to size. In it, and we'll take a closer look at these samples here in a minute. Let's just make that the right size again. There we go.
Maybe I don't need this guy.
There's a little strip of copper there.
So copper is for calibration. It gives like a certain line.
Right. So it's a scanning electron microscope, right? So it's looking at what it basically shoots X-rays through it to give you.
Yeah, it's shooting an electron beam, and an electron beam generates X-rays.
Right.
And those X-rays allow determining the composition of the sample.
Right.
And that's what we will attempt to do.
So we're looking.
Incorporate it.
Yeah. So you'll get some results for the composition of the stone itself, but potentially also if there's any remnant inclusions
Right.
from
We'll be looking
machining.
for inclusions caught in the tool marks.
Yeah.
That's what we're going to
Okay.
I'm going to set the stage. I'm going to pull this guy and to start pumping. Okay. So we'll bring it under vacuum because it requires vacuum for operation.
So vacuum, right?
And then I'll be able to turn on the electron beam and it will start scanning, and when it hits the surface, generates X-rays. X-rays are picked up by this detector, silicon wave detector. And then a crunch to produce a spectrum, and spectrum would have peaks.
Yep.
And the software is able to look at the peaks and tell you what the composition is.
Right.
So it's copper, cobalt, iron, silicon, whatever.
Right. And you can get alloys. I mean, it identifies specific
it
elements
tells you
within
the,
an alloy.
Percentages of what it thinks the composition is, maybe like 25% copper.
That's a good comment, David.
Silicon.
Yeah. So we're expecting. Yeah. I mean, with the stone itself, I guess we're expecting silicon.
Silicon, oxygen,
Mostly. Yeah.
And maybe sodium, calcium, and things like that.
Right.
But, metals are easily recognizable.
Yes.
That's what this is good for.
Lightsaber wouldn't leave a residue, indeed.
Superficial embedded metals. And of course, you can look only on the surface. You cannot look inside the sample.
Right. So it's just on the surface. Cool.
Asa, I assume you're watching this on a computer or a device. You're pretty much technically a rich person tinkering with expensive toys as well right now, just so you know.
Beam energy, 20 kilovolts. Jesus.
Yeah, pressure's going down.
It's Florida. That's what you wear in Florida, isn't it? So yeah, pressure's coming down.
You can grab a chair.
So pressure's coming down, then we go over and we generate an image, and we'll get to that in a second. So first, let's talk a little bit about the vases, so where these things come from. Now, this is some footage of some, while we're talking about them, of some of the new acquisitions that Matt's made, some just absolutely beautiful hardstone vases. His collection's up. He's got quite a number of them now. He has been scanning them. Now, this was actually in his podcast room, and he has the collection out, and we were playing with it, and I got the chance to film and take photographs of many of them. They were phenomenal. Like, that's Matt. There's Russ. We're playing with his expensive toys. Now, these are expensive toys. That one has some gold plating around the handles. This is another one that's really interesting. It's also a new one I hadn't seen before. That is it's also looks like it's like probably porphyry or something like that. This one has, obviously the gold plating around the lip is interesting, but what is a probably more interesting feature to me that's on this and on a couple of other vessels that you'll see is you actually have these, the lug handles. Most of them, they have some curvature to them that matches the curvature of the vase. But on a couple of these newer ones that he's got, they're actually concave. They curve the other way, which is, you literally can't do that in a lathe process. I mean, the lug handles are a challenge for any even just regular lathing process as it is, because you'd have to leave like a bullnose all the way around the vessel, then come back with a another procedure to mill off the material and then leave your handles. But then to actually get a concave shape like this is a whole other challenge. Like, you've needed a tool with a different radius that's coming in from the side to actually shape it that way. You can see it clearly there, right? You can see that shape to it. Is actually it does narrow pretty much on not just here but also on top. Like, it's almost like a cylindrical concaveness to it, if you know what I mean. Yeah, he's got some pretty sweet shoes on. I'll give him that. And it goes with the purple theme in the room. It's wait till you see the podcast. It's quite a room. Phenomenal vase. And some of these have proven to be just incredibly well made, is what I'd say. In fact, and he has been continuing to get these scanned by basically CT X-rays as well as structured light scanners, but CT X-rays have a lot more accuracy to them. I do have my hand. I've got my hands on a lot of the scan reports. I'm working on a vase update video because there's been a lot of work happening. It's been a while since we've talked about the vessels. This one in particular I found to be just super, super interesting. I'd never seen one with quite this shape. You can see it has that same shape as the vessels, but it's not like it's been squished down flat. This is one of Matt's videos, and as you can tell, like, a lot of these spin. They just keep on spinning. They're just incredibly well made. How old are these? Most of these, I mean, just anyone is going to tell you, even the Egyptologists will tell you, they are at the youngest. You're talking Old Kingdom, ancient Egypt, 3rd, 4th dynasty, and they go back in time. Is one of the reasons that I find them so intriguing, is that they're artifacts that can be buried with people, and they were buried with people, and they've been found in pre-dynastic burials going back many thousands of years prior to, the Old Kingdom ever starting, or the beginning of the ancient Egyptian civilization. Rubate.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Naysayers, thanks for the $10, man. The Aussie $10, I appreciate it. Naysayers will claim prior contamination. Can you definitively prove there has been no contamination? We're going to talk about that when we get there. Essentially, no, these samples were never really handled or intended for this type of work. We did, and I'll get to this right at the end, we did take one sample and deliberately contaminate it to see what that would look like. And I'll show you the difference between that and what we found with the actual embedded fragments of metal. No, but I'll talk a bit more about that as we get into it with contamination. I'm sure the naysayers are going to... I'm predicting they'll be like, well, they're fake, you planted them, you're lying, that sort of nonsense. It's just like, no, head in the sand, I can't believe what you're saying. Any other reason will do, kind of naysaying. I'm sure they will. And I'm sure people will say contamination, but there's a difference between contamination and like embedded bits of material that you can literally see in the stone, which is what we observed and we'll get to. So put it that way. What type of granite are these vases? They're not all granite. Granite's kind of like an overarching term for lots of different types of stone. Some of them are diorite, some of them are porphyry. You might have ones made from schist. There's 100 different names, syenite, all these different materials. There's a lot in that overarching umbrella of roughly granite, and varies in hardness from things from like 5 through to 7, 8, even 9 on the Mohs scale, if it's got a bunch of corundum in it, for example. So yeah, when it comes to the vases, and if you're interested, one thing I did want to just throw up here was if you guys are seeing this for the first time and you don't know much about the vases and the vessels, I have put a lot of content out about these things over the last year or two, really, at this point. So if you go to my channel, and by the way, I did pass 500k subscribers just recently, so 500,000 subscribers. Thank you to everybody out there who subscribed. It's much appreciated. I'm going to mention it in this video that I got coming out pretty soon. But you can scroll down and find a lot on these ancient vessels. And in fact, in order, if you wanted to go, I would start with this one, which was now about a year ago, which is, changing the game for ancient precision. This was the first vessel that was scanned and the results were analyzed. I did an update on that, talking with the people who did the analysis and the work. Then after that all came out, there was basically open source, crowdsourced research started happening. Mark Vist wrote his amazing article analyzing the 3D model and reverse engineering the mathematics that have gone into the design behind the vessel. So there's a video here about that, talking about were ancient computers used to design this object. I do talk about these vessels and stuff in my presentation videos. Then we got our hands on, then Matt got involved. We got our hands on more vessels and vases, and we started to scan those and analyze those. I've got a long video on that, includes a lot of that. We also took them into a precision workshop and did metrology experiments on them. That's what this video is about. I talk about them in podcasts. Talked about it with Chris Dunn. Talked about it in my recent presentation video. This one is like a full long, essentially presentation. That's an overall theory. It gets into that. So that's out there if you want to get into more detail about the vessels and the vases. I'm not going to go into all that detail today, but I do want to talk about this one we just saw a little bit, because this thing is incredible. One thing I'll say to you that I saw in a couple of different vases that's remarkable is this. It's this angle in here. So it's like this the sharp angle that's beneath this lip, right? These have little radiuses to them, or radii, and like machining this out in this single piece is phenomenally difficult, and it's quite an achievement. And it's an even more astounding achievement on this vase in particular when you look at the scan results. So again, this thing was scanned, I think, with a CT X-ray, because we're talking about micron level resolution. And I wanted to share with you one page from this report. I'm going to talk more about this in an upcoming vase video, but some of you may understand what you're looking at here, but if you don't, let me kind of explain this and spell this out for people, because this is kind of mind-blowing. What you're seeing here is a measurement of the diameter of the lip, both horizontally and vertically, and it's basically taken with a measurement. So it's scanned, it's very accurate scan down to the sub-micron level, and you can see, and the units here are in millimeters. So it's, if you look at the y-axis and the x-axis, you're looking at measurement of 126.7183 millimeters on the y-axis, so this way, and then 126.7179 millimeters on the x-axis, the horizontal slope. Now, those numbers aren't the same, but they're very close. So close, in fact, that the deviation is less than a micron. In fact, it's 0.4 of a micron. That's the difference. That's how perfectly circular this is. A micron is a thousandth of a millimeter. That's how small that is. You're talking about the size of a bacteria. 1 micron. And the perfection in terms of roundness, the distance on this lip from this side between the horizontal and the vertical axes of this vase is 0.4 of a micron. So this is the deviation from what the nominal is. You can see it's like 0.0415, 0.0411. So 0.4 of a millimeter, 0.4 of a micron. That's 0.0004 of a millimeter in deviation. So I do that with your rubbing sand and sticks and primitive lathes and stuff. I just think it's absolutely phenomenal. I've not seen, this is one of the most precisely measured things that I've seen in all of these. And in fact, some of these new vessels that we've been looking at have, the same sort of precision that we've seen on the ones that I've already talked about, and in some cases like this one, it exceeds it. This is truly remarkable when you get to talk to a machinist about it. If you want to put this into some context, but machinists out there, people that do precision work, they'll understand just how remarkable this measurement is. I just wanted to throw that one out there because I just think it's absolutely incredible. Like 0.4 of a micron is just unbelievable. I sent this to Chris Dunn earlier, and he was like blown away by it. So. Empire, we are $10, man. Heartening to see someone with means funding research. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, and that's thanks to
You're
Max.
a gentleman and a scholar.
For letting us do that. I certainly can't afford to buy a scanning electron microscope, and I don't know how to use one. So having a guy like Max is extremely useful. So let's talk about the fragments that we scanned. These are fragments of hard stone vessels, potentially plates, more likely, I think, vessels and vases. They all sort of fit into the same umbrella. There are several fragments here. I'll let this play. So, interesting one here. I just want to pause this real quick to look at this one. This is actually a really cool piece. It's a quartz piece, rock crystal, silica. Essentially, it's like silica dioxide is essentially, that's what quartz is, SiO2. And you can see quite clearly it has this flat bottom on it, and at the bottom you've got the remnants of a circular, like the tubular drill. You can see that mark very clearly from here. Now, these samples were given to us by private collectors, essentially. And I know for a fact, many of them have come from Saqqara. So just the Third Dynasty site is generally where they're attributed. You know, they were never collected. I mean, we can't really. They're not pristine. You know, these aren't things that were collected with scanning electron microscope work. I can't ever say that word. Microscopy in mind. We were never, you know, so they could be contaminated. We don't really know. And the other thing I kind of want to emphasize at this point is that these results are very preliminary, right? There's a lot of questions yet that we need to answer. I think there's a lot of comparison work that we need to do. We need to take samples of stone that have been worked in modern times. We need to take samples of just stone that are worked with primitive methods and look at those. I think there's a ton of comparative work that needs to be done here. But I can tell you these are genuine samples of ancient Egyptian vessels. The stone type is exactly the same. In fact, when we look at little pieces like this or like this, I mean, you actually see the lip. And I showed this on the Patreon live stream. I've shown some of these samples. They have that tapering, so they start like thicker down here, and they get very thin to right up under this lip, and then you have this sort of machined, this perfect rim on the lip, which you would expect to see on a large plate or a vase, that type of thing. They've got the same tool marks. They are 100% fragments of ancient Egyptian hardstone vessels, matching all of those things from that period. They were found in the sites where they found all of the vases, that type of stuff. These are salt and pepper diorite. So we have, like, this is salt and pepper diorite. Different. You can see how they're different types of stone. They're called salt and pepper because it's white and black. And then you have this piece of quartz, which is essentially rock crystal, with the tool mark in it. We had a couple with obvious tool marks, but again, we're also looking for the nicer machining marks. William Robbins, man. Thank you very much, sir. $10.
For a gentleman
Thank you,
and a
Ben.
scholar.
Hope to join you on a tour someday. Cheers, man. Hope to see you on one as well. We do have a couple. We're running a trip to Egypt in March. That's all on my website. You can find out all details about that if you're interested. Like spinning Pats, $5. Thank you as well. Do you think we'll ever learn the how and why of this stuff? It's such a colossal mystery. I can't think of anything on Earth that seems so out of place. I mean, we're trying to get to the bottom of it, is what I'd say. Like, I think I'm a little discouraged that it doesn't seem like the archaeological establishment is interested in doing this type of work on this material, like trying to delve into the mystery and look at it. I mean, they have the resources. They've got universities. I'm sure they've got access to this type of machinery. They for damn sure have access to, you know, objects and artifacts, and they're the ones who find it and hoard it all away and put it behind, you know, locked doors. They could be doing this sort of research, and I think it would be an interesting one. Like, for example, I think archaeological departments could probably help themselves by engaging with the engineering departments of those same universities to try and do reverse engineering on how some of these things were actually made, rather than just jumping to this like, no, it was copper tubes and primitive methods, because there's this scene on the wall that doesn't match this stuff at all, but maybe can explain how alabaster vessels were made. I think if they actually opened their mind to some of these things and engaged with their engineering departments, it could be really interesting. And they could do scanning and analysis, and they could do digital preservation of artifacts, all that sort of stuff. But that it's wild to me that it's like YouTube punters and podcasters that are getting opportunities to actually do this and put samples like this under a scanning electron microscope. It's crazy. Big Red, $10. Respect for the research. It's time logic overrides children's stories pawned off as science and history. I agree. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
And David Stig
You're a
Hansen,
gentleman
like the sound
and a
effects.
scholar.
I'm gonna try some yourself. Yes, mate. Get a soundboard. I use this thing. It's my green screen's coloring it out, but I know I've just unplugged it. So maybe no more sound effects right now, because I use an Ableton Launchpad for the sound effects. So yes, thank you. I will have to try and get that going again in a minute. All right, so we've got these samples. They are what they are. These are preliminary results, okay? I want to stress that. There's more research that needs to be done. It's difficult to draw conclusions from this. It's very interesting. These are genuine samples. They were found in places where these same vessels were found. But they were never handled with the intent of putting them in a scanning electron microscope. So is contamination possible? Yes. of course. I mean, who knows what the history of these things or where they've been. I mean, if you were to go and try and find a pristine sample somewhere, you're a scientist, you would have to bag that thing up and not touch it and do all that sort of stuff. And even Max, like we were playing with him, he's like, yes, don't handle them too much because you can, your hands can contaminate them. But overall, we found very little in the way of contamination. So let's get into the results.
On your hair.
I'll try and catch up on chat.
Using the filament drive, so we have a decent beam. It's kind of like
And
a
while I'm
flashlight.
at it, let me just do
a certain power, so you can get an image.
this.
Sneak in on that too. Sorry.
Alright, so I do have an image here.
Okay, that didn't work.
Let me bring it into focus.
So how bends? So 2,000 microns.
Yeah, so it's only 24x magnification, so it's an overview. We need to locate the tool mark because for me right now it's hard to tell where the tool mark is.
So
you can drive it with that.
So what you're seeing is the image that's coming up, and this is kind of the topographical primary imager for the electron microscope. You see we're at 24x magnification. You adjust the focus and whatnot, and then he can control it with a little joystick. Full screen, yeah. I mean, we can go as close. We can go a bit more on this. The full screen video will be. I'm doing a produced video on this, and this will have a lot more of full screen on it. So
yeah, there's a stage. And also let's see. Okay, it's a little bit more focused now, right?
So there. So we got the sample back, right?
So we'll fish around until the tool mark.
I know if you're watching on a cell phone, it's going to be tough, but.
We'll zoom in on the tool.
So this is the first piece, and we're trying to find the tool marks, right?
So you think even with
the way this works is this line. I originally thought I get this. I'm sure I'll repeat this later because I got this wrong. But I thought okay, this is 2,500 microns, so 2.5 millimeters, and I thought this was the width of the screen. It's not. This yellow line is 2.5 millimeters. So at 19x, essentially, this is 2.5 millimeters on this yellow line, right? And we can go up to 1,000, 1,500x, 2,000x.
Polishing like those smooth surfaces should still be at high magnification tool marks.
Yeah, I mean, any kind of processing leaves marks because you cannot do atomic precision, manufacturing.
Yeah, true, right, yeah.
Even with atomic precision, there'll be
still
something
see it.
caught in it. All right,
I'll just turn the sample down a bit.
Yep.
Vases on other planets, not that I know of.
You definitely see a ridge there or something, right?
So you start to see features appearing in the stone.
Well, I thought I put it in the middle, but maybe not.
See, Max has got that little joystick there to move it left or right. You can also give it coordinates.
Maybe I should have went up and down as opposed to side to side. Because I moved it about an inch from its center point.
We've got a bunch to get through here. So in the audio in there, where I've left audio in there is like audio to here. To here.
If you recall, it was pretty centered on.
Yeah.
So let's try up and down.
So you start to see tool marks. You can start to see machining marks in different directions on it.
I'm gonna put it there.
Wouldn't they have shit in space?
Vertical lines.
You ever heard of the Black Knight satellite, bro? It's an interesting rabbit hole. I'm not claiming anything about the Black Knight, but it's an interesting artifact. I mean, it's one of those internet rabbit holes you'll never get to the bottom of. Is there a Y-Files episode on that thing yet? That guy does some wild shit.
I think it should be pretty obvious, right? So it's a pretty big gouge there, right?
Yeah.
There are lines in it, but I don't know if it's the...
Yeah, that was maybe it. Okay.
There was a Y-Files.
Yeah, we get the edge. Okay.
Oh, that's cool.
So we know we are at the edge. So
this has got to be part of it.
That's got to be part of it?
Thank you very much,
well,
sir.
How about I look here?
You're a gentleman and a scholar.
My thing's Redux $2 donation for a Schwarzenegger soundboard. I don't have Schwarzenegger on here, but I'll add it to it. Thank you very much.
Let's see.
So you can see the edge, right? We've hit the edge of the sample. This looks rounded on the bottom here because this is the detector, right? It's a circular detector. It's not actually rounded here. This is just the aperture of the, the whatever's detecting this. So you get the edge of the sample here.
So it starts building, composition.
Get to the chopper.
And it's telling us it's silicon and aluminum.
Okay, so you start to see this is so then he picks a spot, right? So you can see this is the edge of the tool mark here. So this is where those circular saw or the circular tubular drills, I should say, marks were. You can see these ridges. And now we eventually do label these peaks, but the way this works is you select a little area like a tiny little crosshair dot, and it hits it with a beam of electrons, and then it's using those X-rays to then try and determine. Essentially, it's a spectrometer result of what are the elements that are in it, and so you get different peaks, and as it builds a return, the system is kind of guessing at the elements that make it up, but you can challenge it and you can look at the peak. So different elements will generate different peaks, sometimes multiple peaks for the same element at different lengths here. So basically what you do is this guesses it as it's building it up, and then you can go and confirm it on the table, on the periodic table. Ahmed Adley, dude.
Thank you
Ahmed
very
Adley.
much, sir.
Shout out in
You're
chat
a
to Ahmed
gentleman
Adley.
and a
Thank you so
scholar.
much for the $10. Ahmed's amazing. Ahmed is an engineer, he's an Egyptian engineer. He does similar content to me. He focuses on the technological aspects of ancient Egypt. He does it for an Arabic audience. He produces phenomenal videos. Highly recommend checking out his channel too. There are subtitles available for I think most of them. I've watched all of them. They're fantastic. Yeah, Ahmed's great. He's been working with Chris Dunn. He's been instrumental in trying to lead the charge of the Egyptians themselves actually rewriting parts of their own history by looking at engineering and technological aspects of the mysteries that are in Egypt. It's phenomenal, dude. Thank you so much for the $10, Ahmed, and great to see you too, mate. Ahmed Adley,
So far,
Ahmed
so it
posted
gives
the super chat.
you have to
And it's
pick
just
a
looking
point.
at that spot here, right?
Just
Okay.
for that spot. So there is no unusual metals there at that spot. It doesn't mean
Right.
they're not anywhere. So we'll just have to look.
So yeah, see these same returns. So we typically on the stone.
And of course, we'll zoom in. I just
Yep.
I just want to find a little bit better spot.
Yeah, we're at a very high level here.
Let's zoom in on it a little bit. Yeah, now we can see it. It's just when you look from the top, because there are no shadows.
Right. Yeah.
But now we sort of know this is through, and this is a ridge, another through, another ridge, right?
Yep.
So how about we zoom in here a little bit? Okay. That's pretty focused.
See, and adjust the focus.
See, we are looking for things like this,
Yeah.
So let's see what the hell is that.
This is like an embedded piece of stone, or we don't know what. Just something looks like it's in the material.
Is this anything unusual? And sure enough, this seems to be something else.
It's W.
It seems to have tungsten in it.
Tungsten. It's not, just spoiler alert, it's not tungsten. But so it's not tungsten, but you see the system is guessing, like the software is trying to guess what material it is based on those returns. But we did find some metals. It wasn't tungsten in this case, and we go through the process of how we eliminate it, right?
Okay. Let me make sure. So I'm gonna do this. These KLM markers correspond to spectral lines of different elements. So this is tungsten. Yeah, I don't think it's a particular line.
So you see this. So you see these blue lines. So he hits tungsten in the periodic table, and if you hit tungsten, you would see peaks on these blue lines, right? So we're not seeing peaks on all those blue lines. It's not tungsten.
Good match for tungsten. Let me see.
Although I was fascinated. I mean, we were like, tungsten, like that's cool.
Silicon. Yeah, so that's a line for silicon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Silica.
So what is this? Let's see. I bet this is aluminum, right?
So we get these peaks, these taller peaks are what you typically see for all of this stone. Okay, so this is the ceramic or the stone material. Elementally, you're going to see silicon, aluminum, calcium, a little bit of oxygen maybe. So that's generally the atomic composition of these types of rock. With the quartz sample, it's essentially, what is it, silica dioxide or whatever. It's you will see a lot of silicon, and that's what we saw when we put that quartz sample in there, which is exactly what you should see. We even had, I hope I pronounced your name right, mate. Dude, $20. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, brother. Great content.
You're a
Always
gentleman
appreciate it.
and a
Thanks so much
scholar.
for the super chat, man. It's greatly appreciated. Cheers. Very generous.
Right, so what is this? Let's see. It says calcium, tungsten, sulfur, bismuth. No bismuth. How about sulfur? Sulfur. Well, there is a little bit of sulfur, but sulfur is probably part of the ceramic.
The stone.
And what's the CL?
Okay, so this is calcium. So this is not particularly unusual.
Yeah, that's probably the rock, right?
And chlorine, could be just.
So aluminum, silicon, calcium. Get used to seeing that. That's the base return for most of these types of stone. That's the elemental composition of hard stone like granite. You'll see a mixture of it. You do also get proportions of it essentially shown over here. This graph isn't linear. So it's not really like a linear. You can't, like, a high peak doesn't necessarily always mean, like, if this peak's higher than this peak, it means there's more of this than this. That's not really the way it works. This is kind of giving you a bit more of an idea about composition of the materials in the sample, at least as far as I think that it works.
Chlorine.
Part of. So
where's the tungsten? So it came back down again. It started out.
Well, the
tungsten,
software
now
is
stuff
trying
like-
to make sense of these peaks, and I'm challenging its conclusion, right? So I see the tungsten disappeared, and if I look for the tungsten line here, where is it? Here. It doesn't match anything, right? So there isn't a
it's
line
over here. Okay.
Or these two lines, and this match better to silicon, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I don't think there is tungsten in that spot. But let's look somewhere else. What about this?
Nope, we haven't got to titanium yet. We will be getting to titanium
So we still have some
soon,
other things.
because the titanium is probably the most interesting part of what we found. So save that for the end. But we did find interesting stuff on these other samples too.
Aluminum is just.
Yeah, aluminum is common. You wouldn't be surprised because it's a part of very many minerals.
Minerals.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Lotus flower, blue lotus, I think, which is the thing that contains DMT. That certainly seems to be part of ancient Egyptian culture. I believe it has it. I don't know. Some people say it hasn't.
Okay, so this might be better. I was waiting for this to come up. This is a different detector that gives.
Bo with the $20, who's also an Uncharted X channel member. Thank you so much, man, for being a member and for the $20.
Thank you very much,
Thanks,
sir.
Ben. Screw
You're a
mainstream
gentleman
archaeology.
and a scholar.
Yeah, I tend to have to agree. One of those for them, because it feels like this is not work that I should necessarily be doing. Seems like something that those guys should be doing. And look, maybe it has been done. I don't know. And this is the other thing. As far as I can tell, I think it's possible that the LAH group, like the Laboratory of Alternative History, the Russian guys, I think they did something like that. I don't know if they used a scanning electron microscope because all their work's kind of in Russian. It's a little hard to decipher. I heard that they had found some metals in some of these stones as well. I don't know what methods they used. I really know nothing about it. But as far as I know, I'm not sure this type of thing has been done before, where you're taking these ancient worked pieces of stone and looking at them and looking for evidence of tool marks and metals and in this type of a process. I'm not sure it has been. Maybe it has. I don't know. But I certainly haven't seen a lot of it or anything. I couldn't find anything from the mainstream academic institutions that have access to both this type of gear and these types of samples.
There's brighter spots for places where you tend to have.
So this is good because this shows you the difference. So now this is the backscatter. This is kind of your primary imaging. This is your backscatter imaging. It does give you with the shadows, and it shows kind of the topology a little better. They're actually also at slightly different angles too. They're not exactly in the same spot on top of the sample, so you do get a slightly different picture between the two imaging sensors. But this is the backscatter array, so when you see metal under this, it's going to show up very brightly.
Metals.
Right.
So if this is bright, let's see what else is that. doesn't seem to be anything unusual.
The same thing, right? Calcium, silicon, aluminum, a little bit of sodium.
Yeah, let me do this.
So again, it's chlorine, aluminum, silicate.
Yeah, which
Chlorine
is,
as well.
Pretty, because clay is aluminum, right? But
Yeah.
this is not necessarily clay, but you'll find aluminum.
You find it in everything in the minerals.
Let's see, what do we get into here?
So usually, this is a secondary electron detector. And secondary electrons meaning when the electron beam hits the surface, it knocks off additional electrons.
Okay.
And this is particularly useful for imaging metals because metals give off a lot of secondary electrons.
Right.
And when you don't know where to look at, if you switch to secondary electron imaging, let's say if you have metal stacks over ceramic.
I will break for this one. Dan.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman
Thank
and
you
a
so
scholar.
much. $100, man. That's super generous, dude. And Dan has been a long-time supporter of the channel. He's been on tours with me as well. We're good friends. He's one of my mods. That's extremely generous of you, dude. You didn't need to do that. He's also supported the Twitch streams quite a lot. He said, congrats on reaching 500K. Thanks for continuing to put in the work and loving the investigation, dude. Thank you so much, man. Thanks, brother. I really appreciate it. You're awesome. Thanks, mate.
You'll see them as bright spots. But you also see
Very
bright
generous.
spots that are just, reflection points.
Right.
Angled. And I don't see anything that looks, like
metal.
crystal here, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, as he's saying, like you get bright spots from metal, you get bright spots from angled bits of stone that reflect electrons, and you can see here. So you also get this nice topography of the sample. So we're seeing right here are these ridges, which are like 1400, 1.4 millimeters across. These are like essentially those tubular drill marks that we're still on the first sample.
Yeah. And are those tool? Do you think those are tool lines? Those ridges that we're looking at, like
Yeah, I think these are two lines. So let's trace this through the sample. Maybe we'll see something interesting.
Something's happening. I think I'm getting follows on
Because
there.
there's the edge, right? Yeah, you can see it much more clearly there.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, it's also OBS is connected to my Twitch channel, so that's an alert for like Twitch follows, people following my Twitch channel. Just ignore that.
And that secondary.
Because this part reflects better into the.
Okay, so let's see here. Let's get into. We looked at the base rock, so we start to and you just again, I kind of want to emphasize this as well, and it's a comment that Max makes here somewhere, I think, about how clean these samples are.
That.
I mean, it could be in the sand,
Yeah, I think there's a comment he makes here.
You send that to Carl.
Yeah.
Surprisingly clean. I guess I've never seen samples that clean.
There you go. You looked after it. Yeah.
I guess were they washed or something? Scrubbed. That.
I mean, it could be in the sand. I don't.
A lot of these were buried in sand in the bottom of the step pyramid for a long time, getting sand.
So yeah, he's commenting on how clean the samples are. Like you would expect to see a bit more than what we're seeing, and it's kind of one of the takeaways that Max was thinking about. And one of the reasons that he thought that potentially ultrasonics could have been used, although we did also find some metals which we're about to get into now. And I just want to say thank you to Mathewson Artistry for
Thank
the
you very
$20,
much, sir.
man.
You're a gentleman and a scholar.
Will this information give an origin point as to where it was quarried? It could be. I mean, so one of the you could do a comparison of the stone types, yes. So if you took a sample from a quarry and you compared it under a microscope, you might not need an electron microscope, but you could, visually as well. But I think under a microscope, and the elemental analysis would help too. But you might be able to match up quarries to specific stones. It's one of the big mysteries about these vessels, right? Because there's literally dozens and dozens of these sort of semi-exotic stone types that have been used to create them. Lapis lazuli and tourmaline and all those other things, and for example, the lapis stuff has always been a mystery to me because we have things like the hollow tubes of lapis that I've seen at least 2 of them that were found in pre-dynastic burials, like you're talking thousands of years before ancient Egypt, and these are like look to be precision machine artifacts. We don't know if that's true because we haven't been able to analyze them. No one scanned them. They're just literally in museum cases next to bone and bead ornaments and mud things and pot and very primitive pottery. But there's just, they're found in Egypt, but as far as we know, there's no source for lapis lazuli in Egypt. So it's, Afghanistan, I think, is the closest to Egypt for where lapis might be found. And you have literally dozens of stone types like that where we just don't know where these came from. And it's interesting to me because it's kind of a secondary vector on the whole discussion, in that it almost implies a system of if not global, certainly regional trade that might have been happening way back when, sort of pre-dynastic times, in order for these samples to end up in Egypt, where they've been found. It's something I've mentioned on other live streams, and I will for sure mention it in the upcoming sort of Vase video. Is that Egypt's not the only place that machined and precise artifacts have been found. There's a whole host of them. Is it Versadoco is a good channel that's been looking at some of the artifacts that come out of Turkey. So you have machined obsidian artifacts that are dated in sites back to 10,000 BC, or 9 or 10,000 years ago. Certainly, like in the Neolithic Stone Age, that are machined, that have lips. They have very similar machining features to what you see in ancient Egyptian artifacts. So it's it's not like Egypt seems to be the only place for this type of thing. They're also finding artifacts like this in Turkey. But it's like, to me, it's like I get the feeling that there has to be and you have to remember too, tens of thousands of these things at least that we found. I mean, 40 to 50,000 of them found beneath the Step Pyramid alone, and that was only by Jean-Philippe Loyer, who was excavating that place from the 1930s. But it had been excavated for 20 years before his time, in modern times. Like, it had been looted in the past, who knows when, thousands, hundreds of years ago, everywhere in between. But someone else was actually working on that site before Jean-Philippe Loyer got in there and started to document it. And it's his findings that give you those numbers of like 40 to 50,000 hardstone vessels. But we just don't know what happened in the 20 years prior to that. Who knows how many things were taken out of there, or what was found. So there was a lot of them, which implies, there was a lot of stone going around, and a lot of these sort of semi-exotic, difficult to find pieces of stone that are just incredible, with large crystal inclusions and all the rest of it, the beauty in the stone that you see when you go to the Egyptian Museum or you look at these things. Charles X-Man, thank you so much for the super chat, $20.
Thank you very much,
you guys
sir.
Have been, very nice
You're
to me.
a gentleman and a scholar.
So, it's a whole other vector on it, right? It's not one I've explored in great depth, but it's something I've thought a lot about, and I'll be writing about it. I'm trying to write a book as well. So I know I haven't been producing a ton of videos. I mean, these take a lot of time and effort to make, but I am at the same time also trying to write a book. But I'll keep making videos. But I think there's the Tale of Two Industries thing is pretty much a book at this point.
Yeah, that's inoperability aluminum.
Yeah.
It's a silicon.
So we found something else here.
Calcium. I forgot what is this guy.
That's a different. That is a different graph.
Now it's iron is popping up.
Yep. So now we're starting to see iron. So that's iron. See this? So if you click on Fe, which is iron, the atomic, like the elemental symbol for iron is Fe, ferrous, right? You start to see little peaks on the iron scale, and you actually see it here, right? You've got, it's still saying tungsten. It's not tungsten, but you're seeing ions coming back as a return here, and it's matching the peaks on the spectral kind of wavelength scale that we're seeing.
Is that iron?
Am I on Linux? No, I do have a Linux system, but
I'm not
like
on iron to me.
Yeah.
That's
So where's the W? What if you hit the W on the graph? Is it just?
I don't know. I need to look up the spectrum. Maybe there is tungsten. Maybe.
So I don't. It's probably worth investigating some more. This does think it's tungsten. I don't think it matches. There's no peak on this left line. This peak here, I think, is the one that matches silicon as well. But, we're missing anything at all out here in this length. And you see iron was, defined by these two peaks here, which is what we're getting.
I need to recalibrate it a little bit better.
But iron definitely there. Fe.
Yeah, iron seems to be there. Yeah. So that's I'm pretty sure that's iron.
We're still missing one here.
Zircon. Is this zircon? That's the question, because that looks like a zircon peak.
A zircon?
Yeah.
That's a.
So we're seeing zircon, right? So iron and zircon in this little bit that he's sampled that's got a different coloration to it. Now, I want to explain this as well. because it's an important point, and this is something that people will say. I've already seen it in some of the comments on the short. Obviously, things like iron and titanium exist naturally, right? They exist in stone. In fact, iron is the single most, what would you call it, populous element on the planet. Like Earth is primarily iron. It is the most. It's the element that there is the most of on Earth is iron, but it exists in nature. It exists in oxide. So you have iron oxide. You know, that's pretty much the term for it. Titanium also exists in nature as titanium dioxide. So what you expect to see as a return when you find those naturally occurring oxides in stone, which is entirely possible, they could be in this stone, you would need to see a return on the oxygen as well, right? So if you were going to have an oxide, you need to have titanium and oxygen, or iron and oxygen, and we're not seeing that. So in a lot of these cases, and I'd love to get, for example, a piece of iron oxide and put it under this process and see what that return actually looks like, so you have a basis for comparison. But in general, and particularly as you see when we get to the titanium piece that we found, it's an embedded fragment of something that is returning pure titanium or pure iron, or both. You know, that can be an alloy. If you have multiple metals in something, so for example, bronze is an alloy of tin and copper. You know, all of these types of things. So you'd see those, but in order to get like raw iron, you have to process and smelt and work on that iron oxide to actually get iron out of it. Same thing with titanium. And titanium's interesting because, I mean, it wasn't really even discovered until the 1700s, and it really wasn't used outside of laboratories until the 1930s, I think, was the start of kind of the industrial application and use of titanium outside of just like a laboratory concept. So it's a relatively recent discovery that we're finding kind of elemental titanium in this that I do not think is in the form of an oxide. It's actually in spots in the rock that look like embedded fragments of something. And I'll show you what contamination looks like too at the end, because at the end we deliberately contaminated a sample with titanium to show you what that would look like. As a little experiment, but we across these other samples we found a bunch of different metals, and it doesn't look anything like at least the contamination that we did deliberately at the end. So there's a lot of context here, and again, these are preliminary results, but it's interesting. So what we're finding here is zircon. So we're finding a little bit of iron and some zircon, Zr. So zirconium, think of like fake diamonds and whatnot. I think Russ mentions it here.
Zircon is like it's like a
metal.
Metal.
Mineral.
It's a metal.
Yeah. Fake diamonds.
Zirconium. Okay.
Yeah, it's a pretty heavy metal.
Yeah. So we got zircon and iron in this one.
So I don't
spot
think
here.
I've seen this peak before.
Yeah, that third one there is kind of new.
So let me do this.
So now we get to the point where we should have done this before. Is like label the peak. So now he's put a ZN on there.
Just leave that there for
That's interesting because we use tungsten carbide for cutting bits for like extreme industrial.
Yeah.
I would like to know if it's
Well, iron and zircon.
iron and zircon is like that.
And that tungsten's still there again.
So we're still on this same little spot here that shows up.
It's tungsten, but it's
You see, you're getting a lighter reflection of the metals from the backscatter detector.
Yeah,
still have that third
I'm not
peak.
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's not tungsten. It's just I probably need to look up tungsten spectra a little better because it has several peaks,
yeah.
and we don't see any other.
So you're saying there should be peaks here?
Well,
this
very.
vis-
Yeah, sorry about the ads on the live stream. I can't control that. That's a YouTube thing. I put it on its minimum setting, which is like 1 per hour. So apologies if there are ads.
Small ones, if there was that much tungsten, you should see, peaks in
over
here
there
too.
as well.
And this peak, you see, is not visible.
on the edges.
Yeah, that's
right.
why I don't think it's tungsten, right?
Okay.
But if
Do I know history for granite, Doug? Yes, we've swapped some emails. I haven't spoken with him, but yeah, maybe we'll do a collab or a chat at some point too. I like his work.
you do aluminum, this peak is explained.
Definitely there.
That peak is explained by silicon, right?
Yep.
But that peak is not explained by anything but zircon.
Zircon.
I don't see any other element there,
Yeah.
but zircon is there. And that's definitely iron because
Yeah,
look,
strong iron response here.
That's iron.
In fact, this is primarily iron. You can see here we've got the majority is actually iron. So this is a strong sort of iron, potentially zircon, either alloy or something. I don't know, but it seems to be like a primarily iron area in it. And again, you're not seeing oxygen on this, right? So I don't think this is iron oxide.
Solid iron.
Solid, yep.
Yeah, so we found a little bit of iron with zircon in it.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are ways around YouTube ads. There's lots of ways around them.
Okay.
And it's a pretty big, it's like 50-50 almost, iron zircon. So if you, let's say, take natural iron, and you can say it was contaminated by zircon, but you will see like a fraction.
A fraction.
But out here, it's
like
the same amount as iron.
Right, so it's...
Actually, let me get the iron to stick, so we don't have to switch from it. Let's see, iron.
Elena Hawk.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and a
Gobsmacked.
scholar.
Thank you for all your hard work. Thank you so much for the super chat, Elena. I appreciate it.
So we'll keep these two for iron. And
So the aliens made some knickknacks with the ancients to play with? Maybe.
Yeah, let's turn it
I'm not
off.
saying that, but
So we know
who
what
knows?
the peaks are.
Yeah.
so now we should have done this
yeah.
before, but eventually we
And that was
silicon.
Silicon, yeah.
So I'll get that to stick.
Oh, that looks cool.
Yeah.
So now we get labels on them, right? So aluminum, silicon, zircon, calcium, iron. Right, so pretty clear what's in the sample. You're getting some of the rock and some of this. You typically get the rock. I mean, it's going to hit that electron is going to it's going to diffract those X-rays through the rock as well. So you're always going to see some aluminum and silicon as a result of just the base material. That if there's a piece of metal in, that it's in. Diamond the Day from Oppenheimer Ranch. I have not. No.
Well, you'd expect pieces of metal to be brighter, significantly brighter.
All right, let's see where we go from here, because this wasn't the only thing we found. Let's see what else.
Like brilliantly white.
Right.
That's how
Okay,
much.
so standard rock
many
returns. We've kind of
electrons do you
explained that. So one thing I wanted to show you here as we go into it is the other part of this. We'll come back to the metals here in a second, but this was interesting just because you can see at a high level of well, not a high level of magnification, but on this sample, you can see those machining marks, right? So this is all probably the polishing marks on the stone under magnification, and they're pretty much all similar. Like the tool marks, when you compare this to like modern cutting methods, and we did the little copper bar that we looked at the end was very jagged relative to any of this work. Felt smooth to the touch, but under a microscope like this, it looks super jagged. This is very fine and precise work under a microscope. You see similar things over here, right? So you can see these marks. There might be scratches in it, and I think even polishing and machining, you're going to get lines that come at different angles, but most of these seem to be pretty much all done in a similar angle. It looks like there's a scratch here as well. But yeah, this is all pretty clean, and these surfaces, when you touch them, and if you ever come to Egypt on our tours, particularly the one in March, we always do go down beneath the step pyramid, where there are literally hundreds of these types of pieces laying around that you can pick up and handle, and you can actually touch them, because there's very few vessels and vases that you can actually touch in museums. There's some real big ones that you can put your hands on. They don't like it when you do that, but you can do it. But most of the other ones, the really nice ones, are always behind glass, or they're in cabinets. You can't touch them. But you can, beneath the step pyramid, there's some large fragments of stone vessels, and you can get a sense for just how smooth and amazing the surfaces of these things are. It's hard to describe. They're incredibly well made. So NJJ, man, thank you so much for the $5, and also Cos Billingham for the 10. At this point, I'm surprised you didn't see a nanoscale hallmark from a manufacturer. Yeah, we were looking for it. We were looking for it. Didn't see it this time. This, and to be fair too, this is very much a needle in a haystack exercise, right? There's so much space to cover. You're looking at this micron level scale on pieces that are this big. That's a lot of microns, and you're just sort of casting about. And we didn't have time to do a systematic sort of search. You could, put that thing in there, stick it down, and then systematically do a grid search across the whole surface of it. It would take hours and hours, and I mean that's the type of thing I'd love to see done over time, potentially, but this was very much a casting about. Let's try and find the tool marks, try and find something interesting, zoom in on this, zoom in on that, see how it goes. So, that's the nature of what we could get done in a couple of days. But obviously, that's again emphasis on preliminary, right? This is very preliminary work. I think it's very interesting, and it's indicative of the need to do more work, and more follow up and more comparative work. So looking at other samples and things like that.
Thank you very much, sir. You're a gentleman and
Joan
a scholar.
Berkowitz, Alabama Wyatt, thanks so much for the super chats. Joan for the $10, much appreciated, and Alabama for the 2. Might be work by interdimensional beings. Who knows? Yeah, not a theory I generally go with, but I don't know. I'm open minded, right? I can't rule it out. I think it's explained by technology, but
This is definitely a piece of tin.
Yeah.
so on another sample we found a piece of tin, and you can quite clearly see it lit up. Like, so in that backscatter array, you see this piece of metal, and you see this very strong tin return.
It came from,
And no copper, huh? Because it's copper and tin is bronze, yeah?
no copper though, yeah.
Yeah, no copper.
Thank you very
Cost
much,
billing
sir.
you, man. Thank you for the
You're a
10.
gentleman and a scholar.
And Nicholas, thank you for the 5, dude.
It's pure tin.
Yeah.
And everything else is just an artifact or...
So you can see how clean this return is, right? It is just pure tin, like just straight SN. There's very little other elements in it. You see this strong peak of tin here. And again, tin has to be refined. It's pure tin. It's not bronze. You would see, if it was bronze, you'd see copper in it. And again, we saw 0 copper anywhere, nothing, nada, like not a speck. But we found like what looks like a piece of tin potentially embedded in it. Could it be contamination? I don't know how tin would get into this thing. But it's a piece of tin, and it wasn't the only one that we found. So,
So, I think it's remarkable to know that we found a piece of pure tin.
Yeah.
And it's about a few microns.
It's only a couple, yeah, barely.
But it's
70 microns is right for about a human hair. Yeah,
so this
which
is
is
definitely
like
more interesting.
between 2 and 3 thousandths of an inch. So yeah, we're finding another tin piece here.
Yeah, it is. It's tin. Yeah.
So we found another tin piece here.
That's that peak to the left of
that's
calcium.
You see SN coming up.
So could it be?
It's not.
How big is
bronze,
the
I mean, you
spec?
see
Well,
copper.
we can see the spec. So this is quite zoomed in. So this line represents 190 microns, right? So that's 0.19 of a millimeter. So it's like a fifth of a millimeter across this line. So you might be looking at something that's maybe 3 or 4 microns wide. I'd guess maybe not even that much, maybe more. Yeah, maybe 3 or 4 or 5 microns. So, pretty small. And that's the type of thing that you can see with this examination. Those are the types of things you'd expect to see, because we're looking inside a tool mark here. So if tin's involved in any metal that's been used to scrape this out, it's those tiny fragments of metal and of material that gets embedded in the surface of the stone, right? Because the surface at that microscopic level is going to vary in hardness, right? And even granites like hornblende, mica, silica, all these different components that make up this conglomerate material that we call granite. And as you machine that out, like, not everything is always at that microscopic level going to get cut cleanly. You might have little things little pieces that get torn out inside the cut, and then that on the next pass or whenever this tool's going to scrape off a little bit of metal and shove it in there. Those are the types of things that you can look for with this procedure, and that's kind of what we're looking for here.
Calcium.
So very small.
So could it be?
It's not bronze. I mean, you see copper.
Yeah. I was going to ask, like, tin is a component of bronze.
Yeah, but no copper.
Right.
A strong tin.
So could chemicals have been used? That's another good question. It's possible. So, another possibility here is that these were used to hold stuff somehow. That I don't know how you get metals in there out of chemicals that would end up embedded in the stone like this. There's a lot of possibilities for what this could mean. That's why I keep emphasizing that this is preliminary. It's tough to draw like a solid conclusion from it. I think you'll find the titanium thing pretty interesting. We certainly did. We're getting to that, and we're getting there. Like we've got another little bit of footage to go here yet, but let's see on overall where we're more than halfway here, so we've just got to go through this last bit here, and we'll get to the titanium. But so far we've got zircon, we've got iron, we've got tin.
So what's that peak to the right of? There's another peak in there too.
Could this detect diamond dust? Yes, it could. I mean that.
Is this because
you'd see it? It's carbon.
You made your dot smaller?
I made my dot smaller.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is 10. Okay.
There's another peak there.
Yeah, let's see what that is. Aluminum.
Copper?
No, that's not copper. Chlorine.
So it's chlorine. Chlorine. So we see iron, tin, and chlorine, and then if we move forward to this next little dot that we found that we looked at,
It's iron, but iron what?
we're seeing iron, and we're also seeing something else, like this peak down over here. And just to cut the video short a little bit, it's actually fluorine. So this could have been a chemical like this. It could have been, I think it's called ferrous fluoride. Is the combination of iron and fluorine. Can be called ferrous fluoride. I'm not sure if it's specifically a chemical or not, but we're definitely getting iron and fluorine back here. But we saw iron in a few other spots. We saw it directly. We also saw it mixed with other metallic returns like titanium, which we'll get to. And
Thank you very much, sir.
Puka
You're a
Rabbit, man,
gentleman
thank you
and
for
a
the $10.
scholar.
I appreciate it.
Fluoride.
Fluoride. Fluorine, fluoride.
Yeah, that's fluoride. That peak.
Yeah, I mean that's consistent with fluoride. Yeah.
Fluorine.
It's definitely a piece of iron you got there. So it's not iron oxide.
Tin could be from the spoon.
Yeah. So it's iron, fluoride.
Write a paper for peer review. That's actually I've discussed that with Max. I think it needs more research, but it's certainly I think applicable, because the nice thing about a scientific paper is you just don't draw any conclusions, right? It's you don't have to draw conclusions from it. You could write a paper that says we examined these fragments under a scanning electron microscope, and this is what we found. This is the methodology. This is what we found. You can put it into some context, but, and just your own conclusion would be that this is really interesting in terms of potential, observations around how these things could have been made in the first place. But you don't have to draw specific hard conclusions, and, assuming that the process and everything is, lines up, and you'd have to deal with provenance, and you'd have to deal with sample contamination, all that sort of thing, that the possibilities, right? And if it goes into peer review, it'd be an interesting paper, because maybe that would stir up the academics to look at it. I don't know. Fluorine is an element. Fluoride is the anion. Sorry, yes, so fluorine. Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I do have, like, Rockhopper as one of my patrons, who's a geologist who's right into this stuff. As part of the produced video, that's going to obviously be a bit more research than me just spouting off after, a week or so after we did the work. I'm gonna get a few more expert opinions, talk to a few more people, because obviously I'm not an expert on electron microscopes. I'm not a geologist or a chemist, so I do want to get more research and talk to more people so I can put something that's a bit more informed out there. But I thought this was a fun sort of exercise to share with you guys, kind of the results of what we got. Look at the raw data. And again, emphasize that it's preliminary. It's tough to draw conclusions from it, but we sure as hell found some interesting things.
Okay.
That sounds pretty technological to me.
Yeah. We got tin chloride and iron fluoride.
And then we found something else here as well.
Mercury, lead?
ZN. Zinc. We found a piece of zinc in it, and it's really strong zinc return.
Not lead. Zinc.
Zinc.
All right, that's interesting. Zinc. What the hell is zinc?
And now it's again like batteries.
Yeah, so Russ is like batteries. If it's zinc, it's like...
So you found a piece of zinc. So you see, the sample is a lot more interesting. And this also seems to be wedged in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to be.
So yeah, it's again, as Max is saying, like, this isn't like a bit of dust. And I'll show you what dust looks like contamination and dust of particles. Again, like I said, we did do that deliberately to look at it. And, this is not what that looks like. And I'll show you that at the end. But yeah, so this is like a wedged in piece of what seems to be zinc. Daryl Brook, I'll stop for the red ones. Holy crap. Daryl Brook, $100. Love your work, Ben. Keep up the progress.
Thank you
Daryl,
very much, sir.
thank you so much.
You're a gentleman and a
That's
scholar.
really generous, dude. You guys have been super nice to me. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. The support means a lot to me too. I very much appreciate it. Maybe, yeah. I'm not in getting my own scanning electron microscope territory, but you guys make it possible for me to actually do this work. So thank you.
That's a piece of zinc with some sodium.
And to be fair, not to harp on the support thing, I very much appreciate it because, look, the channel hit 500K, that's great. But let's face it, this is super niche, right? This is never going to be, the millions and millions of views that whoever's talking about whatever happened on social media or just doing reaction content based on the latest Twitter spat or whatever. Those types of views that get it, right? You've got to be kind of down this rabbit hole to click on an hour-long video talking about ancient hardstone vases. So given that it's quite niche, I definitely rely on the support as well for that. So thank you so much, guys, for the people that are supporting and all the channel members, everybody else on Patreon, etc.
But it tells you zinc, so it's primarily zinc. It's just, these peaks won't be as pronounced as these ones because, it's not like here. So this is a pretty good,
I'm pretty sure it comes from Monty Python, that sound clip. I'm not sure. I have this one. Maybe you prefer this one. This one's...
Thank you, Tracy. You've got sharp eyes and beautiful earlobes.
reliable
example.
indicator.
Yeah.
So it tells you it's zinc.
So we got zinc. Whoops. No, escape. Let's go back to this. All right, so now we get to the interesting part with titanium. So we're on to the last sample, and in fact, this popped up in the last sample. So you can see here a really strong titanium return. This is titanium, but I'll show you the sample and the bit that we're talking about. We found it in a few spots, but there was one piece in particular that held our interest for quite some time.
Yeah, we kind of lost it somewhere in there. Spot.
Uh-oh.
Definitely getting some titanium on this one.
I'll try again. So it's not here.
So we see iron and titanium, I think, in this.
Yeah, I think it's that spec.
That spot there.
That spec, yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely it.
But it's
and this is iron.
And iron. So it's
Yeah, this is
titanium and
iron.
iron.
Iron and titanium.
There's the spot.
So he's looking at this little spot over here. And again, we're at 600 microns with this yellow bar. This thing here is what's interesting, right? See how it's a different color? It's lighting up as a different color. So we're finding titanium in this area, titanium and iron. But this little thing here is what we end up zoning in on. And this proves to be very interesting. And it's a larger little thing it's definitely not contamination. Like, this is embedded
Well, that's
in
the
the
stage.
rock.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the camera staging.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can zoom in on that guy and see if we can take a better look.
Yeah, let's do that. We lose it?
Yeah, I think
Costman, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. You're
for
a
the
gentleman
tenor.
and a scholar.
It seems somewhat ironic that even interest in the truth of our history is pretty far down the rabbit hole niche. Yeah, I mean, I agree. Not everyone's interested in pyramids, man, but I certainly find it fascinating. I'm glad you guys do as well. I have beautiful earlobes. You can't see my earlobes; they're hidden right now. You don't know what my earlobes look like. Well, maybe you do. Did you just watch the core or something, Craig? The unobtainium? Isn't that the material that that dude in the core made that ship out of? He called it unobtainium.
I think this is iron chip.
Yeah, that's iron.
Then he clicks on this thing.
There
Oh,
it is.
this is the thing. Oh, wow. It seems like a smudge. That's actually done.
Yeah, YouTube definitely takes their cut of everything, but it is what it is. So this is further zoomed in. So again, now we're getting down there like 200 microns, 0.2 of a millimeter. So it's this thing here, which has an interesting shape to it, right? I mean, Russ looked at it and said it's almost like it's square with a chunk missing out of it, almost like it's a tiny little tooltip of something that's been embedded in the stone with a hole in the center. You see it's got that different coloration to the other rock around it, like it's a brighter white than the gray around it. And this is titanium. So, and this is not like contamination. This is something that's in the rock, and it's probably, you're going to hear us talk about it, that it's bigger than, it's like 40 or 50 microns. I think it's more like 15 to 20 because this is, I mean, if this is 200 microns, maybe it is 30 or 40 microns, that length. So this width here on this line, let's say it's about there. So yeah, maybe it's a 30 to 40 microns wide. So, reasonably sized piece. And you'll see us zoom
50
in on it.
microns across. Yeah, I'll do that too. We found a spot.
Try to get a better picture.
The whole grid's 200 microns. So
Microns, okay,
yeah, it might be micrometers.
Yeah, I got it wrong. It's the
15
yellow line
micrometers
is
across this round thing here, and it's
200.
showing pretty a positive.
So yeah, see silicon. So this is you see a strong silicon return from the rock, aluminum. You see a tiny bit of oxygen, calcium, but strong titanium return.
Return for titanium.
Show up much on the back scatter.
So when you do the other imaging,
seems
like
to be more like
so on the other imager, without you don't get the same return on the metals. You're seeing it's almost like a raised little bump, something that's sort of jammed in there. And it's only when you look at it with that sort of metal sensitive detector that it shows up a bit differently.
piece of it. Yeah, you cannot make out it like as a separate entity, right?
Yeah.
Right, let me zoom in on it some more.
Yeah, and cognitive dissonance says it right. Titanium is natural, but not in quantities and not in pure form. It's not natural in its pure form anywhere. It's natural in an oxide called titanium dioxide, and it needs obviously refining to get pure titanium.
It looks like a square.
And we don't.
Yeah, it does.
With a broken.
We don't get. This is the piece here.
It is funny looking for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, silicon is the rock itself, like the silica. That's a major component of the stone.
So we can pick up some details.
Yeah.
It's almost like these little. It's like something's in there and it's been shaved off, or it's knocked down. Like it's a strange little piece.
Yeah. So according to this, main component is titanium.
Yeah.
Competes with calcium.
So if you click in the middle with that little hole, you see, okay, there's not a lot of return, but mostly silicon, which means it's just rock in the middle.
So the white material looks like it's the metal.
Yeah. So the white seems to be.
That's a very good question, Joseph Renner. Does the spot go through the entire artifact, or is it only on the surface level? It's only on the surface level. So what you see is very much on the surface level. Now, I don't have the footage from it, but I did. So it's obviously these fragments are broken. So at one point I did get one of the fragments. We put it in edge up, so the broken edge up, and I looked at the edge. I was looking to see, because it's one of those theories that comes out of the Serapeum and some other places, the possibility of some sort of liquid or something transforming the surface of the granite to give it that smooth and shiny finished appearance, to see if we could see any evidence for that. And I didn't see anything, at least on the one piece we looked at, edge on. It was tough to get any elemental returns from that just because of the angles of the stone. But at least under a microscope, it didn't look like anything other than just stone that was broken. But all of this, again, you're pretty much just getting the surface with this elemental composition. And that's also a benefit of having broken pieces, because you can look at both sides of them. You can essentially look at the inside and the outside of, say, a vase or a plate or a vessel. You can flip the sample over. And we generally didn't do that. We were looking at the inside mostly. I think on a couple we looked at the outside. One of the samples looked like it had a crack in it that had been repaired, and we looked at that crack, and it's actually a natural crack that was in the stone. There's nothing in there that's repaired it. It's just there was a crack in the stone, and they just somehow machined the damn thing anyway. Like, it didn't break on that crack. So that was actually pretty impressive. And again, these little topics I'll touch on in the video that I'm going to make about it, but it's not stuff that I really have prepared here. We're mostly looking at sort of what we found in the stone.
Or titanium is sort of this That's a piece of titanium right there.
And there's iron coming back there too.
And iron.
So we found titanium and iron in those spots around it.
Titanium and iron.
Where is that? Where did you click? This thing, that little thing down there?
Yes.
Stack at the bottom.
Right. How about that one up high there, like here?
Yeah, I'll try that too. Waiting for you to get a little bit better, picture. Okay, let's look at this. It seems to be not much of anything.
A little bit of titanium.
A little bit, yeah.
So there's a good image. Titanium, iron. You see here, this is primarily an iron with titanium sample. Potentially an alloy, who knows? But you're getting the return of both of those back here. So let's see, what do we got here? Titanium and iron inside of, and we're looking inside of tool marks on this one. So we have, we're inside a groove on a tool mark here.
This is looking inside one of the scratches, the machining marks that's on this little piece.
I didn't see any nitrogen.
So deep in the scratch, we're getting lots of little spots of titanium and iron.
Exotic metals? What's an exotic metal?
Returns.
Yeah, like this one is iron, yeah.
This one's
like
iron.
plutonium or something? I'm glad we didn't find any plutonium.
Which is interesting.
Uranium.
Yeah, because
And this
the
is
bulk doesn't have, the bulk is, say, aluminum and silicon, right?
Yeah, so the bulk is this. Yeah, right. This is the actual rock. This is the mineral. That.
So yeah, like I said, this is the actual rock that you get. A little bit of oxygen, aluminum, silicon, calcium. That's what you see on just on the stone. But in these other little specks and fragments, we're getting iron and titanium.
Yeah, right. This is the actual rock. This is the mineral. That inside the scratch, this might be.
If there was an element that didn't correspond to anything on the periodic table of elements, I don't know if we'd even see it. We'd certainly find a peak that we couldn't match to a symbol. That would be something else. But you know, given that they pretty much do the count with the protons, you know, all the way up, I'm pretty sure we've got most of that map. But who knows? Maybe I'm wrong. I'm sure there could be elements out there with, I guess it's got to be more protons than what we have, because it's like, you know, what's one? Hydrogen, two nitrogen, something like that. It's not nitrogen. What's two? Oxygen. So it's like light to heavy, and then you can create these, like, you know, larger, like particle accelerators can create other, like, other metals that have much higher density of protons that only exist for a fraction of time, that type of thing.
Who knows? It might.
Max is in the chat. My conclusion is that piece was not machined like we are machining things. Yeah, so Max is in the chat. Hi, Max. Good to see you, man. And Max, I'm going to talk to Max. He's going to be, we're going to record some conversation for the video. But, and this is something we talked about it earlier, but Max was saying that this piece, these pieces weren't machined like we machine things. And we talked quite a bit about the possibility of something like ultrasonics doing it. Because as I said, the real key takeaway here were just how clean the samples were generally. Although in a few spots over the couple of days we spent doing this, we found little specks of metals here and there. Mostly they were just really kind of remarkably clean. So it's possible they were machined with a different process altogether. And the other key takeaway was no copper for me. And then we found, you know, some interesting metals and things that certainly bear further investigation.
The remnants of whatever might have been used to make it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's mostly iron and titanium. Yeah, I'd say about 50-50.
What about that little round?
Fluorines, that's fluorine, yeah.
Fluoride or fluorine?
Fluorine.
Whatever.
Fluorine, yes. That's maybe
Iron. Ferrous fluoride, whatever they call it. Yeah.
Yes.
What about the round thing?
Okay, so without dragging this out too much further, we found more of the same, and then let's see, what is this? This is the little the iron bit that's a close up of the bit that we saw with iron and titanium. Again, this is not, you know, this is something that seems either wedged in the stone or otherwise. I'm not sure.
Yeah, almost like it's sticking up. Yeah.
But maybe you're right. The backscatter just has a slightly different angle.
Yeah.
So it's like
so it's creating its own shadows.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we ended, and then we had to end it after we let Russ drive the electron microscope because he just created a black hole and the experiment was over after that. Russ is in control of the scanning electron microscope.
Now the science is really going to get done here.
Yes. I feel like a black hole is incoming or something. Okay.
It's aluminum.
Okay, so that's pretty much most of what we found. So it was zircon, tin, zinc, iron, and titanium across those samples that we looked at in the first place. Now, as I said, we also did deliberately contaminate a piece. Actually, let me just do one of these. So we deliberately contaminated a piece with some titanium, and this this is basically showing you what that looks like. So this is like titanium dust, essentially, on a piece.
They will just touch them slightly, and they'll just.
You see, it looks completely different to the embedded fragments that we were seeing. We probably don't need the audio so much here. So it looks completely different, right? So then once you hit on it, you get a titanium return, and it's just titanium because it's a big enough piece of dust where it's not hitting the surrounding material at all. So you can see what happens when you actually contaminate a piece. And so I think that looks differently to the piece that we were just looking at, that with that, that's 15 to 30 microns embedded in the stone. And this is, again, sort of part of the comparison work that I think if we're going to keep going down this path, we need to do more comparison to other things like stuff that's been machined with modern materials and modern tools, and then stuff that's worked by hand and that type of thing. So, yeah. And there's a piece of there's like a zoom in on a piece of just titanium dust. It's very clear, and it's different to sort of the other samples that we were looking at, is what I'd say. Cool. All right. Well, how long have we been going for? I don't even know. What's the time? So it was like an hour and 40 minutes. So I think we got through most of the findings from this. As I said, I'm working on a more produced sort of deep dive into these results. I think it's a starting point for what we need to go do. I think it's an interesting point. I'd love to see other people engage in this type of research as well. I'll cover these points as well as a lot more in that video when we get into it. Obviously, it'll be a bit more researched and scripted, but I hope you guys found that interesting, at least. I know there's some people in here use SEM and X-ray analysis for 40 years. You obviously don't understand the level working at here. Okay, there's a conversation going on in chat. Fair enough. Random. Yep. Sorry. Well, so the replay for this will be available on my channel. It'll be up there, so you can check it out. But I do want to just say a massive thank you to everybody for tuning in today. A huge thank you to everyone who supported the stream, all of the super chats. It means a tremendous amount to me. David K.
Thank you very much, sir.
You are indeed.
You're a gentleman and a scholar.
A gentleman and a scholar, my friend. Thank you so much for the $10 at the end here. Any evidence of sonic manipulation of material? Do you know of any current action? So if you're talking about things like ultrasonics, I mean, that's what one of the things Max suggested was a possibility that it could have been ultrasonics. And after all, his PhD and his work is in cavitation and ultrasonics and things like that. We talked about that up at the front. Bob G, man, thank you so much for the $10 as well.
Thank you, Tracy.
Awesome.
You've got sharp eyes and beautiful.
So in terms of channel news and what's coming up,
earlobes.
I am working on a video. I'm nearly done with it. That is dealing with a lot of new discoveries that have been made at Abu Sir. Super interesting. They've done a lot of work digging up on that site. I want to share some of those with everyone. Then I'll be doing this video, basically looking at the scanning electron microscope work. I've got a Serapeum video in the works. It's been a few years since we've looked at that site, and I've certainly got a lot more footage and a lot more observations that I've made there. And also another vase video. So, like I said, Matt has been scanning many more vases. We've got a lot more results to talk about, a lot more vases to look at. There is progress slowly happening with, Egyptian museums and Egyptian universities, for that matter, to do vase scanning and analysis over in Egypt. And there's some updates there, which will be really interesting. Kristen Morlock, thank you so much for the $10 as well. Much
Thank you very much, sir.
So
You're
I
a
got a lot on
gentleman
my
and a
plate coming
scholar.
up. And a reminder to anyone that if you want to come and see some of these things for yourself or see these sites with me and Kyle and Russ from the Snake Bros and Yusuf, we're running a tour. We're only going to do one for next year, and that is in March. And if you're interested in that, check it out on my website. It's unchartedx.com. But otherwise, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. And I will catch you all in the next one. I'll take a look at some of the chat questions. I know I missed a lot of them. My apologies for that. Last one I'll get here is what content was found inside the thousands of vases? Not a lot. They might have found some evidence at some point for residues for things like oils or perfumes, but I think one of the explanations for that is that I do believe these things were used as vases by the dynastic Egyptians. I'm not sure they were ever made for that purpose in the first place. That wasn't their original intention, but I'm confident that the dynastic Egyptians, assuming they inherited them and they found them, they would have used them as that. Not all of them work as vases. Some of them have pointy ends. They can't stand up on their own, things like that. There's a lot of nuance in that, and it's a topic I do get into in my vase videos. So, yeah, if you guys are interested in any of that, do check out the back catalogue. There's a whole lot of content talking about these hardstone vessels and Saqqara and all those things, the areas where they were found. You can check it out on my channel or on my website. All my stuff's on my website, unchartedx.com. So, thank you guys. Take it easy. And we'll catch you in the next stream. Hopefully I'll do another one in the near future here. And otherwise, look out for new videos. Stay sub to the channel. Have a good day. Cheers. If I press this button.